The night had fallen heavily over the small, forgotten village, wrapping it in a cloak of cold silence. The wind whispered through broken fences and cracked mud walls, carrying with it the smell of dust and dry earth. In a tiny, dimly lit house at the edge of the village lived a widow named Miriam, along with her 2 children, 10-year-old Ali and his younger sister Zainab, who was barely 7. Miriam's life had not always been this hard. Once, the house had echoed with laughter, and the lamp on the wooden table had burned brighter, fueled by hope rather than fear. But that was before her husband's sudden death. An illness they could not afford to treat had taken him away, leaving Miriam alone with 2 hungry mouths and a future filled with uncertainty. Since then, every day had become a quiet battle for survival. That evening was no different from the countless others. Miriam sat on the floor near the hearth, stirring a small pot of thin lentil soup. It was barely enough for the 3 of them, but she had learned how to stretch scarcity into something that resembled a meal. Ali watched silently, understanding far more than a child his age should. Zainab hugged her knees, her eyes fixed on the pot, as if staring hard enough could make the food multiply. "Ami," Ali finally said, his voice gentle, "it's okay if you eat more. I'm not that hungry." Miriam smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. "A mother is always hungry last," she replied, placing her hand on his head. Inside, her heart ached. She wished she could give them more than empty reassurances and watered-down soup. After dinner, the children lay down on the thin mats spread across the floor. The night was unusually cold, and Miriam covered them with the only blanket they owned, even though it meant she would shiver till morning. She sat near the door, sewing a torn piece of cloth by the weak light of the oil lamp, hoping to finish it before dawn. Someone in the village might pay a few coins for the repair. Just as her eyelids began to feel heavy, a strange sound broke the silence. A faint groan. Miriam froze. At first, she thought it was the wind playing tricks on her tired mind. But then she heard it again, clearer this time. A human voice. Weak. In pain. Her heart began to race. Ali stirred and sat up. "Ami, did you hear that?" "Yes," she whispered, standing up slowly. Fear crept into her chest. Nights were dangerous, especially for a woman alone. Thieves, drunk travelers, and wild animals all roamed freely after dark. Every instinct told her to bolt the door and pretend she heard nothing. But the groan came again, longer, more desperate. "Someone is hurt," Zainab murmured, clutching her mother's shawl. Miriam hesitated. She looked at her children, then at the door, then back at the children again. Her mind filled with questions. What if it's a trap? What if the person is dangerous? What if helping him puts my children at risk? Yet another voice rose within her, quiet but firm. What if it's someone dying? What if this is their last chance? She wrapped her shawl tightly around herself and picked up the old lantern hanging by the door. "Stay inside," she told the children firmly. "Do not open the door for anyone. I'll be right back." "Ami, please don't go," Ali pleaded, fear clear in his eyes. Miriam knelt in front of him. "I have to," she said softly. "If someone needs help and we turn away, we lose something far more important than safety." With that, she stepped outside. The cold night air cut through her like a blade. She raised the lantern and followed the sound toward the dirt road that ran past her house. A few steps ahead, near a fallen tree, she saw a figure lying on the ground. It was a man. He was dressed differently from anyone in the village. His clothes, though torn and stained with blood, were clearly expensive. A wide-brimmed hat lay beside him, and his boots were worn but of fine leather. He looked foreign, like someone who did not belong to this poor, forgotten place. Miriam's breath caught in her throat when she saw the blood. The man's face was pale, his lips cracked, his breathing shallow. He had clearly been injured badly, perhaps thrown from a horse or attacked on the road. One wrong move, and he could bleed to death right there. She looked around nervously. The road was empty. No help was coming. "Can you hear me?" she asked, kneeling beside him. The man's eyes fluttered open for a moment. He tried to speak, but only a faint sound escaped his lips. "Please, water." Miriam swallowed hard. Water she had, but bringing him into her house, that was another matter entirely. She thought of her children, sleeping inside. She thought of the gossiping villagers who might accuse her of bringing trouble into the community. She thought of the little food they had left, of the risks, of the fear. Then she looked at the man again, dying, helpless, alone. Without another word, she made her decision. With immense effort, she dragged him slowly toward her house. He was heavy, and her arms trembled, but she did not stop. By the time she reached the door, her breath was ragged, and sweat mixed with tears on her face. Ali rushed to open the door despite her earlier warning. "Ami, what happened? Help me," she said, her voice shaking. "We must bring him inside." Together, mother and son pulled the injured man into the small house. Zainab stood frozen in fear, her small hands covering her mouth. Miriam laid the man on the floor near the hearth and quickly fetched water. She gently lifted his head and helped him drink. Some of the color returned to his face, but he was still dangerously weak. Ali watched silently as his mother tore a piece of her own shawl to bandage the man's wound. "Ami," he whispered, "who is he?" "I don't know," she replied. "But tonight, he is a human in need. That is enough." As the night deepened, Miriam stayed awake, tending to the stranger, checking his breathing, whispering prayers under her breath. Every sound outside made her tense, but she did not regret her choice, not even once. She had nothing to give but kindness, yet she gave it freely. She did not know that this single act of mercy, performed on the coldest and darkest night of her life, would set into motion a chain of events far beyond her imagination. She did not know that the man lying helplessly on her floor would one day rise again, and return with the power to change her children's future forever. For now, all she knew was this. That night, despite her poverty, despite her fear, despite the risks, a widow chose humanity over helplessness. And fate was watching. Chapter 2. Morning arrived quietly, as if unsure whether it was welcome in the widow's fragile world. Pale sunlight slipped through the cracks in the mud walls, falling gently upon the small room where the stranger lay. Miriam had not slept. Her eyes were heavy, her body exhausted, but her heart remained alert. All night she had watched over the injured man, listening to his shallow breaths, fearing that each one might be his last. But he lived. When the man finally stirred, it felt like a miracle whispered directly into Miriam's soul. His eyelids fluttered open, and this time they stayed open. Confusion filled his eyes as he looked around the unfamiliar room, the cracked walls, the simple hearth, the worried children standing near their mother. "Where am I?" he asked weakly. "You are safe," Miriam replied softly. "You were hurt. We found you on the road." The man tried to sit up, but pain forced him back down. He clenched his jaw, clearly not used to helplessness. "You saved me," he said, his voice thick with disbelief. Miriam nodded. "We did what we could. My name is Daniel Cole," he said after a pause. "I owe you my life." The name meant nothing to Miriam then. To her, he was only a wounded stranger. But there was something in his eyes, gratitude mixed with pride, and beneath it all, a quiet strength, that hinted at a story far larger than her small home. For days, Daniel remained with them. Miriam tended to his wounds using herbs she learned about from her mother long ago. Ali helped him drink water and brought firewood. Zainab, shy at first, eventually began sitting near him, asking innocent questions that made him smile despite the pain. As he grew stronger, Daniel learned about them, their poverty, the loss of Miriam's husband, the daily struggle for food. Each word tightened something in his chest. He had wealth, power, influence, and yet it had been this poor widow, with nothing to spare, who had risked everything for him. One morning, when he was finally able to stand, Daniel insisted on leaving. "I must go," he said. "But I will return." Miriam shook her head gently. "You owe us nothing. Just live." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "No," he said firmly. "Some debts are not measured in money. I will not forget this." He left that day, walking slowly down the same road where he had nearly died. Miriam watched him until he disappeared into the distance, never expecting to see him again. Life returned to its familiar hardship. Weeks passed, then months. Food grew scarcer. Winter came early, harsher than usual. Miriam sold what little she owned to keep her children fed. Ali stopped talking about school, knowing it was a dream they could no longer afford. Zainab's shoes had holes in them, but she said nothing. And then, one afternoon, the sound of horses thundered through the village. Such a sound had never been heard there before. Villagers rushed out of their homes in disbelief as a group of well-dressed men rode in, followed by a large carriage. Dust rose into the air, and whispers spread like wildfire. Who are they? Why are they here? The carriage stopped near Miriam's house. A tall man stepped down, dressed in fine clothes, his posture confident, his presence commanding. For a moment, Miriam did not recognize him. Then he smiled. "Miriam," he said, her breath caught. "You." "It is me," Daniel replied. "I told you I would return." But this Daniel was different. Strong, healthy, powerful. The villagers watched in stunned silence as he walked into her humble home, knelt before her children, and bowed his head. "This woman saved my life," he said loudly. "She and her children." Gasps echoed around them. Daniel Cole was no ordinary man. He was one of the richest landowners in the region, a man whose name carried weight in cities far beyond the village. When news spread, disbelief turned into awe. That same day, Daniel made an announcement. He paid off Miriam's debts. He arranged for Ali to attend the best school in the nearby town. He provided warm clothes, food, and medicine. But more than that, he offered dignity. "I will build you a proper home," he said. "And I will ensure your children never go hungry again." Tears streamed down Miriam's face. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We only did what was right." Daniel smiled gently. "And that is exactly why." Within weeks, Miriam's life transformed. A new house stood where the old one had been. Ali carried books instead of worry. Zainab laughed freely, her feet warm in new shoes. But Daniel did not stop there. He set up work opportunities for others in the village. He repaired roads. He brought a doctor. Slowly, hope returned, not just to one family, but to many. One evening, as the sun set over the fields, Daniel sat with Miriam outside her new home. "You changed my life," he said quietly. Miriam shook her head. "No, I only chose mercy." Daniel looked at the horizon. "And that choice changed fate itself." Miriam understood then that kindness never truly disappears. It waits. It grows. And one day, it returns, stronger than anyone could imagine. That night, as her children slept peacefully, Miriam whispered a prayer of gratitude. She had saved a stranger once. And in return, destiny had given her a future.